to ask you this question, what is our biggest problem as human beings? I wonder, what would you say? How would you answer that question? What's our biggest problem as human beings? Well, for so many people, the answer to this question is that our biggest problem is that we can't always get the things that we want, and we can't stop happening to us the things that we don't want. In other words, we think that our main problem or our biggest problem is that we are limited in what we can do. But what if our biggest problem is not about limitation? What if our biggest problem is actually isolation? You know, it's a word that we've heard a lot of, specifically at this time of pandemic. We've heard the word self-isolation or people having to isolate. And something that's become really clear during this time is that it's not good for people to be on their own. It's not good for us mentally, it's not good for us physically, and it's not good for us emotionally. We seem to have this deep inner need within us to connect, to know and be known in relationship, to love and be loved. And yet this deep and lasting connection can be hard to find and really hard to keep. Even the best of relationships don't ultimately hit the mark. You know, the Bible affirms this craving by explaining that, yes, we were made for meaningful and transparent connection. But it goes on to explain that the reason that we find ourselves dislocated from others, from the world, from our very selves is because we have cut ourselves off from the very one who made us, who knows us, and who is the source of life itself. Now, if this is the case, then no amount of human progress, achievement, no amount of dealing with our limitations is going to ultimately fix us. We have to get back to connection with God. And yet for some of us, this really raises a fundamental question. And that's, if God does exist, if he's there, and if he knows me, does he actually want to connect with me? I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you've lost touch with either a family member or a friend, and it's gone on for quite some time. I know I've experienced this, and it gets to that kind of awkward certain point in the relationship where you've lost touch for so long that you begin to wonder, well, what do they really think about me? And so either you think they're not going to be interested in me anymore, or you might think they're going to be angry with me for not being in touch for so long. Don't know if you've ever experienced that. But for some of us, this is how we think and feel about God. If he's there, then he's either not interested in me or he's angry at me. But when we encounter the person of Jesus Christ, we discover something else altogether. You know, John, who writes as one of Jesus's closest friends, tells us these wonderful words in his biography about Jesus's life. He writes this in John 1:14. He writes, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Now, when John writes that we beheld his glory, he's actually testifying that he and his fellow disciples, as those who did life with Jesus, as those who walked and talked with Jesus, who witnessed Jesus' life on earth, who related to him like you and I relate together, that they actually saw something in him that totally convinced them that Jesus was not simply another human being. That actually, when you looked into the face of Jesus Christ, you were looking into the face of God. Now, it's a testimony that both John and his fellow disciples were not only convinced by, but they were willing to stake their lives upon. This testimony that in Jesus, God had become man. But why would God become a man? Why would he come and live amongst us? Why would he come to this earth and dwell within our midst? Well, there's so many reasons why, but I just want to offer two reasons this morning. And the first is this: he comes to show us that he is so fiercely committed to being with us. My daughter Grace has been going through a really interesting phase of late. When she gets upset about something, when she's embarrassed, when she feels frustrated that she's not getting things her way, her very first instinct at the moment is to run away and hide from me. And you know what? As her mum, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that she runs from me. So much so that my very first immediate compulsion is to run after her. It's to pursue her. And when I find her, I crouch down to her level so I can look her in the face and let her know that no matter how many times she runs away from me, I will always keep pursuing her. And if it takes me going after her, if it takes me making myself small in order for her to hear that and understand that, then I will do that. You know, that's exactly what Jesus was doing when he came to earth. When we ran away from God and rejected him, his first response was to come after us. And when he took on the frailty and vulnerability of being human, he was making himself small for us so that he could stoop down to our level, to look us in the face and tell us that he is for us and wants to be with us, to show us that he is so fiercely devoted to us that he himself will go to the greatest lengths to pursue us. You see, in Jesus, we find a God that is far from being disinterested in us. We find someone who is so fiercely committed to being with us. He comes because he's fiercely committed to us. But secondly, he comes not to condemn us, but to offer us a way back to him. You know, John also writes here in this verse, he writes that Jesus comes as one who is full of truth and grace. John wants us to know that whilst there is truth, there is always grace when we encounter Jesus. You know, truth without grace in any relationship is harsh and unforgiving. For who of us could ever stand in the harsh light of truth without experiencing the shame of our own brokenness? None of us can. And yet grace without truth in any relationship is shallow and inauthentic. There is no real knowing or being known without truth. But Jesus Christ comes full of truth and grace. In Jesus, here is God who knows us just as we are, with all of our brokenness, with all of our foibles, with warts and all, and yet at the same time offers us unconditional acceptance and forgiveness. But the only way that he can do that, the only way he can offer that, is by standing in the gap on our behalf. When Jesus, as both God and man, dies on the cross for us, he bridges the great divide between us and God that has been caused by our own waywardness. As someone who is both full of truth and grace, he doesn't ignore the reality of our rebelliousness, but rather he takes the consequences of it upon himself and offers us a way back to God. This is not the act of an angry God who is out to condemn us. This is the act of someone who loves us and is willing to pay the price of our moral brokenness upon himself. You see, it all ultimately boils down to this. No broken relationship can be healed without someone making the first move. And in Jesus, God has made the first move. No broken relationship can be healed without someone making the first move. And in Jesus, God has made the first move. When we walked away from God, he comes after us and he says, I want to be with you and I'm prepared to do anything to make that happen, even if it means making myself fragile and small in order to show you that, even if it means sacrificing my very life for you. I want to be with you and I want you to be with me. But here's the deal. Whilst God makes the first move to heal the brokenness in our relationship, he can't fully restore it unless we too are willing. The choice is ours. We can either turn away from God and resist his move, or we can turn towards him. Now, I don't know where you're at today. I don't know if you would call yourself a Christian or not, but irrespective of what you call yourself, Perhaps you are someone on this call who's sitting here and you know that in your heart you are far away from God. He's like that friend or family member that you have lost contact with. And you're just not sure if he's interested in you, or worse still, you think that he's just angry with you. If that's you, God is saying to you today, in Jesus, I have made the first move, and I will always make the first move. In Jesus, God is saying, I am fiercely devoted to you. Will you let me show you how much? In Jesus, God is saying, I'm not here to condemn you, but to offer you grace and forgiveness. Now, will you receive it? So will you? Will you respond to his move this morning, either for the first time or perhaps for the first time in a long time? I want to invite you to make a response to his move in your life. And to do that, I just want to invite you to pray a very simple prayer that goes along the lines of sorry, thank you, and please. And the words of it are just up here. And so if you'd like to pray that prayer, then I want to invite you to pray that prayer along with me as I pray this prayer. But why don't all of us right now just close our eyes and in our own hearts, just come back to God this morning. So let me just pray this. Dear God, I'm sorry that in my heart I have run away and rejected you. But thank you for making the first move. Thank you for dying on the cross for me. Please come into my life and help me to live life with you. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, we're going to, after this morning's service, there'll be an opportunity for a Zoom cafe, but there'll also be a separate link for prayer. And if you prayed that prayer for the first time or for the first time in a long time, I want to invite you to hop onto that prayer, and there'll be a few of us on there who would like to just talk to you and to pray for you. So do that. But the second response point I want to make for us today is that for those of us who do have a relationship with God through Jesus, that I think there's a response for us in this as well this morning. And that's this, that if God in Jesus has made the first move towards us, then how is he calling us to make the first move towards others? Is God prompting us to show him to others by making the first move? And so as we go into worship, I want you to think about that as well. Is God calling you to make the first move with someone in your life? And just as a couple of prompts, maybe it's to do with a broken relationship that needs healing. I know for me, the Lord's been speaking to me about that. Is he speaking to you about making the first move in a broken relationship? Well, the second thing could be that there is someone that you know of that's in need, practically, maybe emotionally, maybe spiritually. And the Holy Spirit is nudging you to make the first move with them this morning.